Every morning, my chauffeur drove me from my townhouse to the headquarters of Northstar Holdings. And almost every morning, his girlfriend sat beside him in the front passenger seat. At first, I ignored it. Her office was supposedly along our route, and the extra stop cost only a few minutes. I had bigger problems to deal with than a young woman catching a free ride across Chicago. Then one rainy Tuesday, I opened the rear door of my Bentley and found a bright pink card taped to my usual seat. No parasites. Pay for your own ride. I peeled it away and looked toward the front. My driver, Daniel Brooks, stood beside the car with one hand frozen on the door handle. His girlfriend, Madison Reed, remained in the passenger seat, staring at me through the mirror as though I had tracked mud across her living room. "What is this?" I asked. Madison twisted around. "You can read, can't you?" Her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "You climb into my boyfriend's car every day and let him drive you around for free. Do you have no dignity? People like you always find someone successful and attach themselves like ticks." For several seconds, I genuinely thought she was joking. Then Daniel hurried toward me and lowered his voice. "Miss Hale, please don't take it personally. Madison doesn't know I work as a chauffeur. She gets jealous easily, and I may have let her believe the car belongs to me." I stared at him. "You may have?" He swallowed. "She thinks I'm an executive at Northstar. I was going to explain eventually, I just haven't found the right moment." Madison tapped impatiently on the dashboard. Daniel leaned closer. "She's uncomfortable riding with you. Let me take her to work first. I'll come back in 15 minutes. Before I could answer, he slipped behind the wheel of my Bentley. Then he drove away. I stood beneath the awning of my own townhouse and watched the taillights vanish into traffic. After a moment, I took out my phone and called the police. "My vehicle has just been taken without my permission," I said calmly. "Yes, I know the driver. No, he does not have authorization to use it for a personal trip." I had negotiated hostile takeovers, dismissed senior executives, and stood before rooms filled with investors waiting for one wrong word. Yet nothing had prepared me for being called a parasite by a stranger sitting in my car. 23 minutes later, a patrol vehicle stopped outside. The two officers had barely approached me when the black Bentley appeared at the end of the street. Daniel turned too quickly, braked hard beside the curb, and jumped out before the engine had fully settled. His face had gone gray. "Miss Hale, why are the police here?" One officer stepped between us. "Are you Daniel Brooks?" "Yes, but this is a misunderstanding. I'm her driver. I take her to work every day." "You left with the vehicle after she told you to remain?" Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. The officer glanced at me. "Miss Hale, would you like to file a formal complaint?" Daniel's expression changed instantly. The confidence disappeared, replaced by panic. "Please," he said, stepping closer, "for my father's sake." That stopped me. Daniel's father, Richard Brooks, had driven for me for nearly 7 years. He had been punctual, discreet, and painfully honest. 3 months earlier, a serious heart condition had forced him to retire. On his final day, Richard came into my office and asked for one favor. His son had recently lost his warehouse job. Daniel had no savings and no direction. Richard wanted him to have a chance to rebuild his life. I had given him one. Now Daniel stood beside my stolen car, using his father's name as a shield. "Miss Hale," he whispered, "my dad is already sick. If I lose this job, it'll destroy him. Madison is the first serious girlfriend I've had. I only lied because I wanted her to think I was successful. You let her insult me in my own car? I know, I was wrong. And then you drove away after I told you to stop?" He lowered his head. "It won't happen again, I swear." The officer waited. I should have pressed charges. Instead, I thought of Richard recovering at home, probably still proud that his son had found stable work. I exhaled slowly. "I'm not filing today." Daniel nearly collapsed with relief. "Thank you, Miss Hale. I promise you'll never see her in the car again." The officers left after recording the incident. Daniel opened the rear door for me with exaggerated care, as though perfect manners could erase the last half hour. For the next 2 weeks, he seemed to keep his word. Madison disappeared. The passenger seat remained empty. The interior smelled freshly cleaned. and the pink note was gone. But Daniel began arriving late. 5 minutes became 10, 10 became 20. Each time he had a new excuse. An accident on Lakeshore Drive, a dead phone, a leaking pipe, a neighbor who needed help. The explanations changed, but the result never did. I reached the office late. An international merger was consuming nearly every hour of my day. I warned him twice, documented the delays, and moved on. Then, one Saturday morning, I decided to spend the weekend at my country house near Lake Geneva. I called Daniel. "I need the car in 30 minutes. There was a pause. "Miss Hale, there's a problem." "What kind?" "I found a nail in the front tire. I'm at a repair shop. They're backed up, so the car probably won't be ready until tomorrow." "Which shop?" Another pause. "West Side Auto?" "Send me the address." "I will. Or I can order a car for you." "No, stay there. I'll arrange something myself." I booked a private car to the lake. 90 minutes later, we passed through the stone gates of my property, and there, parked beside the fountain, was my Bentley. All 4 tires were perfectly intact.
I told the driver to stop at the gate and walked the rest of the way. Music thundered from inside the house. The front door was partly open, and unfamiliar laughter spilled onto the terrace. The moment I stepped into the living room, I froze. My cream-colored sofa was covered in muddy shoes. Empty champagne bottles crowded the marble table. Cigarette ash had been crushed into an antique Persian rug, and someone had used one of my crystal bowls as an ashtray. At least 15 people were scattered throughout the room. Madison sat in the center of them, holding a glass while her friends praised her. "Your life is unbelievable," one woman said. "A Bentley, a lake house, and a boyfriend who owns an investment company." Another laughed. "When you marry Daniel, remember who supported you before you became rich." Madison smiled proudly. "He already treats me like his wife. This place will practically be mine anyway." Then she saw me. Her smile vanished. She rose slowly and marched across the room. "What are you doing here?" I looked past her at the ruined carpet. "I was about to ask you the same thing." Her eyes narrowed. "Did you follow Daniel?" "No." "Then how did you find his house?" Before I could respond, her palm struck my face. The slap echoed through the room. My head turned with the force of it. For a moment, no one spoke. Madison pointed at me as though I were the criminal. "This is the woman I told you about. She keeps forcing Daniel to drive her around because she works at his company." A few of her friends stared at me with immediate disgust. "She's obsessed with him," Madison continued. "She pretends she needs rides, but she's really trying to get him alone. Now she has followed him all the way to our weekend house." I touched my burning cheek. "Daniel told you he owns this property." "He doesn't need to tell me. I've been coming here for over a month." "And he told you he owns Northstar Holdings?" Madison laughed. "You really are desperate. Daniel is the chief executive. You're just some employee he feels sorry for." Everything finally made sense. The perfume sprayed toward me, the disposable covers placed over my seat, the note calling me a parasite. Daniel had not merely hidden his job. He had built an entire imaginary life using my possessions. My car, my company, my home. Madison turned toward her friends. "You should see how shameless she is. Every morning she waits outside until Daniel arrives, then climbs into the back as though she owns the car. I told her to stop, but she called the police and claimed Daniel was bothering her." My expression hardened. That explained the delays. Daniel had continued picking Madison up first, hiding her somewhere, then returning for me. He had used my forgiveness to improve his lie. I took out my phone and called Northstar's security director. "Ethan, send a team to the Lake Geneva property immediately. Bring legal counsel and contact local police." Madison lunged forward and knocked the phone from my hand. It struck the stone floor and shattered. Then her attention shifted to the silver chain around my neck. A small emerald locket rested against my collarbone. Her mouth curled into a cruel smile. "That looks expensive. Did you steal that from Daniel too?" She grabbed the chain and pulled.
The chain snapped against the back of my neck. Madison stumbled half a step, but the locket was already in her hand. "Give that back." She examined the emerald set inside its worn silver frame. "This must be worth a fortune," she said. "Did Daniel buy it for you?" "It belonged to my mother." I reached for it, but she lifted it out of reach. "Then maybe your mother should have taught you not to chase other women's boyfriends." The locket was the only thing I had left from her. When I was 6, a severe infection put me in intensive care. My mother stayed beside me for 3 days, holding that locket in one hand and mine in the other. Inside was a tiny photograph of us. I survived. She died weeks later when a drunk driver struck her car. My father gave me the locket after the funeral and told me she wanted me to keep it. I had worn it every day since. "Madison," I said carefully, "place it on the table." She studied my face and understood that she had found something capable of hurting me. Then she threw it. The locket struck the marble fireplace. The emerald cracked, the silver frame split, and the photograph fluttered into the ash. For a second, the room disappeared. All I could see was my mother's face, blackened at the edges. Something inside me snapped. I crossed the space between us and slapped Madison hard enough to send her into the sofa. Madison touched her cheek and screamed, "Get her!" Nobody moved. "I'll give $10,000 to whoever teaches her a lesson." 2 women grabbed my arms. Someone hit me from behind. A man shoved me down and my shoulder struck the coffee table. Kicks landed against my ribs and legs. Madison stood over me shouting, "She broke into my house and attacked me. Make sure she never comes back." I tried to shield my head while reaching toward the fireplace. One of her friends stepped on it. I heard the paper tear. "You have no idea what you've done," I said. The room erupted in laughter. Madison knelt, twisted her fingers into my hair, and pulled my face upward. "What are you going to do?" she whispered. "Report me to my boyfriend? Daniel owns your job, your salary, and probably your entire miserable life." Before I could answer, engines roared outside. The laughter stopped. One vehicle became 6. Headlights swept across the windows as a convoy filled the driveway. Madison's grip loosened. Car doors opened in rapid succession. Heavy footsteps crossed the terrace. Then the front door swung wide. Ethan Cole, Northstar security director, entered first. Behind him came 2 attorneys, my chief operating officer, and 4 security officers. Ethan surveyed the room, the shattered phone, ruined furniture, broken locket, torn photograph, and Madison's hands still tangled in my hair. His expression became perfectly still. "Miss Hale," he said, crossing the room, "are you seriously injured?" The color drained from every face around me.
Ethan reached me in 3 strides. One officer pulled Madison away while another helped me sit upright. My ribs burned whenever I breathed, but I kept my voice steady. "Photograph everything before anyone touches it." The legal team moved immediately. They documented the broken phone, muddy sofa, bottles, cigarette burns, and every piece of my mother's locket near the fireplace. One attorney sealed the torn photograph inside an evidence sleeve. Madison backed toward the wall. "Who are these people?" she demanded. Nobody answered. Her friends began distancing themselves from her. One woman tried to slip toward the hallway. A guard blocked her. "Everyone stays until the police arrive." Madison pointed at me. "She broke into this house. Daniel invited me. This place belongs to him." My chief operating officer, Victor Grant, stared at her. "You think Daniel Brooks owns this property?" "Of course. He's the CEO of Northstar." Victor glanced at me, then at the attorneys. 4 minutes later, the front door opened again. Daniel entered carrying 2 paper bags and a tray of coffees. "Madison, they were out of the..." He stopped. The bags fell. He saw Ethan, Victor, and then me beside the ruined fireplace with bruised arms. Finally, he saw Madison. "Miss Hale," he whispered. I held his gaze. "Tell them." His lips moved, but no sound came out. Madison rushed toward him. "Daniel, tell these people to leave. Tell them this is your house." He looked ready to faint. "Daniel," I repeated, "tell everyone who owns this house." Silence stretched across the room. Then he lowered his head. "She does." Madison stared at him. "What?" "The house belongs to Miss Hale." Her face went blank. "And the Bentley?" I asked. "Hers." "Northstar Holdings?" He closed his eyes. "She owns it. She's the chief executive." Madison turned slowly toward me. I watched months of lies collapse behind her eyes. The woman she had called a parasite owned the car she photographed every morning. The employee she believed was chasing her boyfriend signed his paychecks. The lakehouse she had shown off online had never belonged to Daniel. "I'm her driver," Daniel said weakly. "That's all." Madison's voice cracked. "You told me you founded the company." I lied. "You said this house was yours." "I know." "How long have you been bringing people here?" I asked. Daniel stayed silent. "Daniel?" "5 weekends."
I looked around the destroyed room. 5 weekends of unauthorized parties. 5 weekends using my vehicle and property while pretending to be me. Madison's friends began speaking at once. I didn't know. She said Daniel owned it. I never broke anything. One woman raised her phone. I only recorded videos. I looked directly at her. Good. Don't delete them. My attorneys will need copies. Her hand dropped. Outside, police sirens grew louder.
The police arrived within minutes. Ethan's team had secured the doors, copied the security recordings, and retrieved footage from the Bentley's cameras. Madison rushed toward the officers. "This woman attacked me," she said. "We were invited here." One officer raised a hand. "Everyone will give a statement. Step back." My attorney, Rachel Monroe, approached with a tablet. "This is Evelyn Hale," she said, "Chief Executive and majority owner of Northstar Holdings, and the registered owner of this residence and the vehicle outside. Miss Hale entered her property and found an unauthorized gathering," Rachel continued. "She was struck first, her phone was destroyed, a family heirloom was broken, and several guests assaulted her." "That isn't what happened," Madison said. "We have complete security footage," Rachel replied, "and recordings uploaded by your own guests." The woman holding the phone turned pale. The officers separated everyone and collected identification. Several guests blamed Madison, while others insisted they had only watched. Daniel found me outside while a paramedic examined my wrist. "Miss Hale, please, my father doesn't know yet. If Richard hears about this, it could make his condition worse." There it was again, his father's illness, offered like a key to another escape. I faced him. "Richard spent 7 years building a reputation for honesty. I forgave your first betrayal because I respected him." "I know. I'm sorry." "No, you were relieved." He flinched. "You promised Madison would never enter my car again. Instead, you kept driving her around, lied about the delays, brought her into my home, and let her believe my life belonged to you. I never thought this would happen. You never thought you would be caught. Please don't fire me." I glanced through the window at the broken silver frame. "She destroyed the last photograph I had of my mother while you were buying coffee." Daniel said nothing. "You are terminated immediately. Northstar will pursue the unauthorized use of the car and property. The police will handle the assaults." "My dad. Your father is not responsible, and he will not be used to protect you." At the hospital, scans showed 2 bruised ribs, a sprained wrist, and deep bruising across my shoulder and jaw. Rachel brought me the locket fragments and torn photograph in evidence envelope. I held it for nearly an hour. The emerald could never be made whole. The photograph had split through my mother's face. For the first time since the attack, I allowed myself to cry. Then I called Samuel Voss, a jeweler who had restored pieces for my family. "I have something damaged beyond repair," I told him. "I need what remains preserved." By the end of the call, we had a plan. The broken emerald in silver would be sealed inside a clear oval pendant. The photograph would be stabilized behind it. It would never look the same, but I would carry it again. Richard Brooks came to the hospital the following morning. Illness had hollowed his cheeks, and he leaned heavily on a cane as he entered my room. "Miss Hale," he said, "I heard what Daniel did." I pointed to the chair. "Please sit." "I don't deserve to." "This isn't about what you deserve." He lowered himself carefully. "I asked you to hire my son," he said. "You trusted my judgment. I gave him an opportunity. What he did with it was his choice." Richard's eyes moved to the evidence envelope. "Was that your mother's locket?" I nodded. His face tightened. "Daniel called me last night, but he kept explaining why he lied, as though one lie forced the next." Richard shook his head. "Explanations don't repair what he destroyed." We sat quietly. "Your years of service still matter to me," I said. "Daniel's actions do not erase your honesty, but I will not protect him from the consequences." "You shouldn't," he replied. "If I asked you to, I'd be no better than he is." Before leaving, he paused at the door. "Your mother would be proud that you kept standing." After he was gone, I looked at the fractured emerald inside the envelope. For the first time since the attack, the weight in my chest eased slightly. 48 hours later, Northstar Holdings released an official statement. Rachel wrote it. I approved every word. It confirmed that a company driver had repeatedly used a corporate vehicle and private residence without authorization while falsely presenting himself as Northstar's chief executive.
It also confirmed that I had been assaulted after discovering an unauthorized gathering at my property. The statement listed my injuries, the damage to the house, and the destruction of a family heirloom. 3 photographs accompanied it: the burned rug, the ruined living room, and the shattered locket beside the torn photograph. By noon, the story appeared on major business sites. By evening, it was everywhere. The headline spreading fastest was brutally simple: driver pretended to be CEO, girlfriend attacked the real one. Then Madison's posts resurfaced. There she was in my Bentley, captioning the photo, "When your man has expensive taste." Another video showed her dancing in my living room while calling it our lake escape. In one comment, she described me as the desperate office parasite who won't stop begging Daniel for rides. Her followers assembled the evidence faster than any investigator could have. Madison's employer, a Chicago cosmetics brand, announced that she had been dismissed. Her friends claimed they had been deceived. Some insisted they never touched me. Others blamed Madison. The security footage showed who had done what. Madison uploaded an apology video. She said Daniel had manipulated her. She claimed she was also a victim and that I had provoked the confrontation. She never mentioned slapping me. She never mentioned offering money for my beating. And she never mentioned my mother's locket.
Northstar's public relations team responded with 3 sentences. The property's security footage is complete. Social media content created during the unauthorized gatherings has been preserved. All materials have been submitted to law enforcement. Madison deleted her video before sunrise. It made no difference. Copies had already spread across major platforms, along with clips from her friends' accounts. One showed her laughing as someone put muddy boots on my sofa. Another captured Daniel opening champagne while claiming the house had been in his family for years. The evidence left little room for reinvention. The criminal investigation moved quickly, but the civil case took months. Rachel built it piece by piece. Unauthorized use of a company vehicle, unlawful entry, property damage, assault, destruction of personal property, and false representation of corporate authority. Every claim had support. The Bentley's tracking history showed how often Daniel had driven Madison elsewhere before collecting me. Fuel records confirmed weekend trips to Lake Geneva. The house cameras recorded 5 gatherings. Madison's posts supplied dates, faces, and captions. Even the note she had taped to my seat survived. Daniel had thrown it into the trunk after the police incident. Ethan found it during inspection. No parasites. Pay for your own ride. Rachel placed it in the evidence file. The locket required a different assessment. 2 jewelers evaluated the emerald and silver. A conservator documented the damaged photograph. Family records established that it had belonged to my mother and was given to me after her death. Its market value was modest compared with the damage to the house. Its real value could not be calculated. Rachel included one sentence in the filing: "The item cannot be restored to its original condition, and no financial award can replace its personal significance." Daniel agreed to settle first. He had no resources for a long legal fight and no company willing to protect him. His employment record now showed termination for dishonesty and misuse of corporate property. Under the agreement, he accepted responsibility for bringing guests into the residence and using the Bentley for personal trips. He would repay part of the damages over several years. He was permanently barred from driving for Northstar, its subsidiaries, and every executive transport company in our partner network. In Chicago, that closed nearly every serious door. Madison refused to settle. Her attorney argued that Daniel's lies had convinced her she was an invited guest. That might explain why she entered the house. It did not explain the slap. It did not explain the shattered phone, broken locket, or her offer to pay people to attack me. Most importantly, it did not explain why she continued after I told her the property was mine. The hearing was scheduled for a cold Tuesday in December. Rachel said I did not need to attend. I went anyway.
Madison entered the courtroom wearing a dark suit and an expression designed to suggest humility. She looked smaller than the woman who had stood over me at the lakehouse. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the careful stillness of someone who understood that every movement was being observed. Daniel sat several rows behind her. He never looked in my direction. The hearing lasted almost 4 hours. Rachel presented the security footage first. The room watched Madison slap me, seize my phone,
tear the locket from my neck and throw it against the fireplace. Then came the moment she offered money to anyone willing to hurt me. There was no music, no commentary, no dramatic editing, only the sound of my body striking furniture and Madison shouting encouragement. Her attorney tried to argue that the situation had been chaotic and that she had reacted emotionally after months of deception. Rachel remained calm. Being deceived about who owns a house does not authorize assault, she said. Neither does jealousy. Next came the social media posts. Madison smiling inside the Bentley. Madison posing beside the fountain. Madison calling me a parasite. One of her own captions described the lake house as a place where she could do anything without consequences. The judge read that line twice. Daniel testified near the end. He admitted that he had told Madison he founded Northstar Holdings. He admitted using my car and residence to support the lie. He also confirmed that after the first police incident, I had ordered him never to bring her into the vehicle again. "Did Miss Hale threaten your girlfriend?" Rachel asked. "No." "Did she harass you?" "No." "Did she ever ask you to pretend to be an executive?" "No." "Did she know you were bringing guests into her home?" Daniel lowered his eyes. "No." Madison stared at him with open hatred. When the judge announced the ruling, the courtroom became completely silent. Madison was held financially responsible for medical expenses, personal property destruction, and her share of the damage to the residence. The judgment also included compensation connected to the irreversible loss of the locket and photograph. The criminal charges would continue separately. Outside the courtroom, Rachel began speaking with reporters. I stayed behind to collect my coat. Madison approached before her attorney could stop her. "Miss Hale?" I turned. Her eyes were red, but she was not crying. "I'm sorry," she said. "Daniel lied to me about everything." "He did?" "I believed him." "You chose to believe the version that made you feel important." She flinched. "I never would have treated you that way if I had known who you were." That was the most honest thing she had said. I looked at her for a long moment. That is exactly the problem. She frowned. "You're not sorry because you attacked an innocent person. You're sorry because the person you attacked had the power to hold you accountable." Her mouth opened, but no answer came. I put on my coat. "The next person you call worthless may not own a company. They may not have security cameras, lawyers, or a public platform." I stepped closer. "They will still deserve basic human dignity." Then I walked away. Samuel finished the new pendant 6 weeks after the hearing. He invited me to his workshop rather than sending it through a courier. When I arrived, he placed a small velvet box beneath the lamp and opened it carefully. The result was nothing like the original locket. The broken emerald had been divided into 5 uneven fragments and suspended inside clear crystal. Thin pieces of the silver frame curved around them like branches. Behind the stones, protected beneath a transparent layer, rested what remained of my mother's photograph. The tear through her face was still visible. Samuel had not tried to hide it. "I could have covered the damaged section," he said, "but I thought preserving the truth mattered more than creating the illusion that nothing happened." I touched the pendant with one finger. "You are right." The original locket had represented a memory untouched by time. This one carried something else: loss, survival, and the decision to continue carrying both. Samuel fastened the chain around my neck. The pendant was slightly heavier than before, and the crystal felt cold against my skin. For the first time since Madison shattered it, I felt as though my mother had returned to her place beside my heart. Daniel's story spread through the transportation industry faster than the court documents. He became known as the chauffeur who borrowed his employer's identity and lived inside it until the truth arrived at the front door. A few small companies considered hiring him, but background checks exposed everything. He eventually found temporary work delivering furniture outside the city. Richard never asked me to intervene. Several months later, he called to tell me Daniel had moved into a modest apartment and was repaying the settlement according to schedule. He finally stopped blaming Madison, Richard said, and she stopped blaming him. That's a beginning. Not a very impressive one. Most real beginnings aren't. Richard's treatment continued slowly. Northstar's former employee medical program did not fully cover the specialists he needed,
so I authorized an extension through the Executive Assistance Fund. I did not tell him. He discovered it when the hospital informed him that his next year of treatment had been approved. He called immediately. "You've already done enough for my family." "This isn't for your family," I said. "It's for you." There was silence on the line. "You drove me safely for 7 years. You protected confidential conversations, refused gifts from competitors, and once waited beside a broken-down car for 4 hours because you wouldn't leave me alone on the highway. That was my job, and this is my decision." His breathing sounded rough. "Thank you, Miss Hale. You earned it long before Daniel lost his chance." Madison left Chicago the following spring. She moved to another state and deleted every public account connected to her name. It did little to erase the articles, archived videos, or court records. The internet had preserved the life she once pretended to own. The Bentley, the lakehouse, the executive boyfriend. Everything remained searchable, followed by the same correction. None of it had ever belonged to her.
I hired a new chauffeur named Michael Turner. His references were excellent, his record was clean, and he arrived 10 minutes early for the interview. During our first conversation, he asked one question. "Are there any rules that aren't written in the employee handbook?" "Yes," I said. "The car is never used for personal business. No passengers without authorization. No deviations from the planned route unless safety requires it." He nodded once. Understood. On his first morning, the Bentley waited outside before I came downstairs. The rear seat was spotless, the passenger seat was empty. Michael opened the door, confirmed the destination, and drove without unnecessary conversation. It should have felt ordinary. Instead, I found myself watching him closely. When his phone vibrated, he ignored it until we stopped. When traffic slowed, he informed my office rather than inventing an excuse. When he noticed a warning light on the dashboard, he reported it immediately and arranged an inspection. Trust returned through small, boring actions. That was how it had always been built. Not through grand promises, through consistency. On the third morning, Michael handed me a coffee before opening the rear door. "Black," he said. "No sugar. The temperature listed in your preferences." I accepted it. "Thank you." Then he returned to the driver's seat and said nothing else. As Chicago moved past the window, I touched the crystal pendant at my collarbone. The pieces inside shifted slightly when the car turned. Different shape, different weight. Still mine. The Lake Geneva house remained closed for several months while repairs were completed. The damaged rug could not be saved. Neither could the sofa. Rachel recommended selling the property. "Too many unpleasant memories," she said. I considered it. Instead, I restored it. I replaced the furniture, repaired the fireplace, and turned the room where Madison had held her parties into a small library. The first weekend I returned, the house felt unfamiliar. Fresh paint covered the walls. New curtains moved gently beside the open windows. There was no smell of smoke, no broken glass, no music shaking the floors. I placed a framed copy of my mother's photograph on the mantel. The conservator had reconstructed it digitally from family albums. It was not the original, but it showed her clearly. Young, smiling, one arm around 6-year-old me. I stood there for a long time. Then I opened the windows and let sunlight fill the room. People later asked whether I regretted giving Daniel a second chance after the first incident. I didn't. Forgiveness had not been the mistake. The mistake belonged to the person who treated forgiveness as permission. Daniel believed my patience meant weakness. Madison believed kindness was evidence of low status. Both assumed respect should depend on wealth, position, and influence. They were wrong. A person does not become worthy of dignity after someone discovers their title, and cruelty does not become acceptable simply because its target appears powerless. That lesson cost them far more than they had expected. For me, it became something I carried beside the fragments of my mother's locket.
The criminal case concluded several weeks after I reopened the lakehouse. Madison pleaded guilty to assault, destruction of property, and interfering with an emergency call. The remaining charges were reduced under an agreement requiring probation, community service, and compliance with the civil judgment. 3 of her friends accepted similar agreements. The 2 people who had struck me most severely received harsher sentences because the footage showed they continued after I was already on the floor. Daniel was charged separately for unauthorized use of the Bentley and unlawful access to the residence. He avoided jail, but the court placed him under supervision and ordered restitution. I attended only the final hearing. When the judge asked whether I wanted to address the court, I stood. "I'm not asking for revenge," I said. "I'm asking for the record to reflect what happened." They believed they could humiliate someone because they thought she was poor, dependent, and unable to fight back. Madison kept her eyes on the table. "The fact that I am wealthy changed the consequences," I continued. "It should not change whether their actions were wrong. What they did would still have been cruel if I had truly been an ordinary employee asking for a ride. It would still have been theft if the car belonged to someone with no lawyers. It would still have been assault if there were no cameras." The judge entered the agreements into the record. Outside, Daniel was waiting beside Richard. Richard looked stronger than at the hospital. Daniel looked older. He stepped forward. "I know an apology doesn't fix anything," he said. "But I'm sorry. For lying. For all of it. For using my father's name. For standing by while Madison treated you like you were nothing. You didn't make her cruel," I said, "but you gave her a story that rewarded her cruelty." He nodded. "I understand that now. Understanding after consequences is easy. Living differently afterward is harder." Richard placed a hand on his shoulder. Daniel lowered his head. "I'll try. That is no longer my responsibility." It was not forgiveness, but it was the first conversation in which Daniel did not ask me to save him. Northstar changed after the incident too. We reviewed every policy governing executive vehicles, residential access, employee credentials, and security alerts. Drivers could no longer keep vehicle keys outside assigned hours. Property access required digital authorization, and every exception generated an immediate notification. Victor called the measures overdue. Rachel called them expensive, but necessary. I called them the price of learning where trust required structure. We also created a confidential channel for employees pressured to conceal misconduct. Daniel had never been senior staff, but his lie had worked because people often hesitate to question confidence wrapped in expensive clothing. I wanted that hesitation removed.
The new reporting system produced its first result less than a month later. A junior employee contacted compliance after a regional manager repeatedly used a company vehicle for private weekends and ordered staff to record the trips as client meetings. Under the old system, she might have stayed silent. This time, investigators acted before the behavior could grow into something worse. The manager was dismissed, the vehicle recovered, and the employee who reported it was protected from retaliation. Victor brought the final report into my office. "One dishonest driver changed half our security procedures," he said. "No," I replied. "One dishonest driver exposed weaknesses that were already there." Daniel had taken advantage of trust, but trust itself was not the enemy. A company could not function if every person were treated like a potential criminal. The answer was not suspicion without limit. It was accountability that did not depend on status. That principle slowly became part of Northstar's culture. Senior executives were required to follow the same vehicle and access rules as everyone else. Exceptions had to be documented. Titles no longer allowed anyone to bypass basic controls. Some executives complained. One vice president asked whether the new procedures implied that leadership could not be trusted. Rachel answered before I could. They imply that trust should survive verification. The complaints stopped. Months passed. The bruises faded, the legal files closed, and the story disappeared from daily headlines. Occasionally, an article resurfaced when someone shared the old video or used the case as an example of false identity and corporate fraud. Each time, Northstar's communications team asked whether I wanted it removed from search results. I always declined. The story was embarrassing, but it was true. More importantly, it belonged to more than me. People recognized something in it. The way wealth can be performed, the way confidence can imitate authority, and the way cruelty often appears when someone believes there will be no consequences. I received hundreds of messages.
Some came from executives whose employees had misused company property. Others came from drivers, assistants, cleaners, and receptionists who had been treated as invisible by people who assumed their jobs made them less valuable. One message stayed with me. It came from a hotel housekeeper in Milwaukee. She wrote that a guest had once thrown a drink at her because a room was not ready. When security arrived, the guest laughed and said no one would believe someone like her. The hotel manager believed her. The cameras confirmed everything. At first, she wrote, I thought your story mattered because you turned out to be the CEO. Then I understood that it mattered because Madison was wrong before she knew that. I printed the message and kept it in my desk. That was the lesson I hoped people remembered. Not that humiliating a powerful person was dangerous, that humiliating anyone was wrong.
A year after the incident, I stood at the lakehouse window while morning light spread across the water. Michael waited beside the Bentley outside. He was early, as always. The passenger seat was empty. Before leaving, I touched the pendant beneath my collar. The broken emerald fragments caught the sunlight, imperfect but still beautiful. My mother's locket had not survived in its original form. Neither had I. But survival was never about remaining unchanged. It was about deciding that what someone broke would not become the end of your story. Madison had mistaken kindness for weakness. Daniel had mistaken trust for something he could borrow without limits. They both learned too late that dignity does not belong only to people with money, titles, or power. I stepped outside, and Michael opened the rear door. Northstar headquarters? He asked. Yes. As we drove toward Chicago, the lake disappeared behind the trees. I looked ahead. The road was clear, the car was quiet, and the life surrounding me was finally my own again.